We are pain, that's all. We are God.
Hey guys. I'm back and I bring to you the part 5 of What If Naruto Gained Unwanted Immortality. The fourth Shinobi War has ended with the sealing of Kaguya and the Juubi in Naruto. As the years pass and his unwanted immortality becomes clear, what will Naruto do when everyone he once fought for returns to dust as the world about him changes? Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 33, The Process. In the real Naruto's Kamui dimension, the blonde paused in creating wards that he was taught by Arya around himself that would draw on his chakra. As he did so, Kurama observed as layer after layer of protection briefly appeared around the blonde before disappearing from plain view. Well, even if magic is less powerful than the jutsus that you already know, at least you don't have to mark up your skin just to provide protection. In fact, it's idiot-proof, which is perfect for the dumbest Hokage of Hokages. Kurama snickered as he poked fun at Naruto, making him remember what Tobirama Senju said during the fourth Shinobi War. Stopping in the middle of one of his spells, Naruto turned to glare at the giant fox. As he suddenly leapt into the air and drop-kicked his friend into the ground after releasing his Kage-level chakra seals. Tsutenkyaku. A crater as wide as a mountain formed where the fox's head got buried into the ground. Not a second later, Kurama brought his head back up and glared at the blonde that was currently floating at the same level as his head. "You're dead, brat." Bijudama. Kurama roared out as a giant dark mass of dense chakra as large as Shikaku appeared in front of his snout. Naruto started crying anime tears, protesting that it was Kurama that started it. Ignoring his only friend, the mighty Juubi no Kitsune narrowed his red-slitted eyes before madly grinning, and shot the giant ball of chakra at the floating blonde. "Damn it, Kurama!" Naruto yelled out as he activated the wards he had placed on himself for the past few hours. Soon, all he could see was red-tinged darkness as a Bijudama that was far more powerful than the previous Juubi could do washed over him. Kurama looked at where Naruto should be, satisfied that the Bijudama he released should have at least given him a few wounds and taught him a lesson. As the dust settled, the giant fox's eyes went wide when he saw Naruto, unharmed, in a multicolored sphere of light. Coughing the dust out of his lungs, Naruto turned to glare and furiously point at his giant furry friend. "Kurama, you damn furball. You could have seriously injured me." Naruto yelled as Kurama just looked at him, before turning around and yawning. "Hey, listen to me you." As Naruto prepared to launch into a long tirade, Kurama flicked one of 10 tails at Naruto, who was then knocked to the ground. "Oh, be quiet, brat. At least we found out that your wards work, didn't we?" Kurama said lazily as he went to find a place to sleep. Just as Naruto was thinking of continuing the argument, a clone in Elesmer popped, relaying him the information about true names and what the Manoa tree clone decided. Kurama looked back, confused on why the blonde stopped suddenly, before Naruto sat down. "Hey Kurama, do you think I have a true name, despite not being from Alagizia originally?" Naruto thought as he reviewed what Arya told his clone about true names. Kurama lied on his side, going through the clone's memories, but narrowed his eyes at the complete control part. "Naruto, if you do have a true name, I'm not sure if it is a good thing. From what your elf mate said, if an enemy has your true name, he could control you and make you do anything. While I doubt anyone here in Alagizia would be able to truly control you, especially when I'm here, you should still be careful. You know how it feels to be controlled, even slightly, against your will." Naruto went silent as he listened to his partner's words. "If I have a true name, we should try to find out what it is, since as you know, it's dangerous to not know all aspects of myself." Kurama nodded before waggling his eyebrows. "So, are you going to tell your mate your true name if you find it? I mean, as a shinobi, you should hide it from everyone, but knowing you." Naruto merely blushed and shot a glare at his friend as he grunted and went back to creating more wards and training clones that were destroyed from the Bijudama. Aragon and Saphira ventured deeper into the depths of the Du Weldenvarden as they thought of the advice that their masters told them. Flashback. Oromiz was placing the still unconscious Phelan inside his hut while Glader was coming back from guiding the Red Dragon, after a couple of oaths in the ancient language, to a cave a distance away when Aragon and Saphira entered the clearing that surrounded the elder dragon rider's hut. "Aragon Finiral, since you are here, I take it that the Manoa tree agreed to help you? Oromiz asked as he started to strap on the last piece of his armor in the clearing where they last met. Yes master, the Manoa tree agreed to help me, but only if both Saphira and I pass her test. Aragon replied as Oromiz merely waited for the rest of the answer. Aragon looked at Saphira before saying, we have to find our true names, both of us. Oromiz and Glader startled a little before looking at each other. The younger dragon rider pair waited as their masters mentally communicated their surprise and thoughts of the matter. Finally, the elder pair turned to look back at their students. The Manoa tree gave the both of you a test to find your true names? Oromiz asked Aragon seriously. After seeing his student nod, he sighed as he gestured Aragon to sit at the across from him as he moved to do the same. As the two dragons knelt beside their respective riders, Oromiz continued from his previous question. Aragon Finiral, you are here to learn how to find your true name. Oromiz stated rather than asked. Seeing another nod, Oromiz started to tell Aragon the dangers of finding his true name. Aragon Finiral, from what we have discussed on the matter of true names, you know the power of knowing your true name, but also how deadly it can be for another to also know it. But what I have never told you was the hidden danger to you of knowing your true name. Oromiz paused as looked directly into Aragon's eyes. What you do not know is that more than a few have gone mad and insane after discovering their true names, and all of them with far more life experience than either of you. I have seen men, elves, dwarves, and dragon riders and their dragons lose their minds over finding what their true names described them as. Are you sure you too want to find out your true? Aragon and Saphira looked at each other in horror, not expecting that just knowing one's true name could lead to such consequences. Little one, must we take this test? Are you sure that you cannot just keep using Zarok as you have before? Saphira thought as she looked worriedly at her partner. Saphira's words cut deeper than any blade could to Aragon. Ever since they left on their journey, the only one to have absolute faith in him was Saphira. To have her start to doubt his ability to pass the test momentarily wavered his determination before he resolved himself to prove that he would not break under his true name. No Saphira, we must do this. If I doubt my own true name, what kind of dragon rider, no, what kind of man would I be? Certainly not worthy to have had you hatch for me. Aragon thought back with clenched fists. Saphira looked back at Aragon and saw only endless resolve in his eyes. Nodding, the two looked back at the elder dragon rider pair. Oromiz and Glader watched the two argue, and after a few moments, saw the younger pair's resolution. Sighing, Oromiz started instructing the two on the methods of finding their true names. Flashback end. So, Master Oromiz mentioned that we should tell each other our flaws and strengths, aside from those he and Glader listed already. Aragon thought to Saphira as they silently strode through the dense forest. As the two exchanged flaws with each other, with each accumulating failing, Aragon's pride was wounded further. Eventually, they found that Saphira's main flaw was her vanity in both herself and her race, the dragons. It was to the point of almost assuming that nothing else in the world could possibly outshine her or a dragon's beauty and power. As for Aragon, it was his naive way of thinking as he killed men in same weaknesses that all others were prey to, but especially humans, anger, selfishness, pettiness, and so many others. But, what surprised Aragon the most was when Oromiz and Glader both claimed that he possessed a streak of arrogance that sometimes displayed itself when they talked about why the Empire had to be destroyed, or better yet, why Galbatorix had to be killed. As they walked for a few moments in relative silence, with only the ambient sounds of the forest and the drifting thoughts between their connected minds, they soon noticed a pair of familiar energy signals ahead, although one of the signals felt much weaker than it usually was. Wondering what the two were doing several miles away from Elesmera, Aragon and Saphira increased their pace and soon came to another clearing that was surrounded by thick green trees that indicated their age and a familiar pair in the middle, Arya and Naruto. Currently, the two were seated across from each other with their hands outstretched, and Naruto's on top of Arya's. Both of them had closed eyes, with Arya sharing her memories about the time when she discovered her true name in Farthendur. In a brief summary of memories, Arya narrated that it was a number of years after she left Du Weldenvarden, when she finally had become accustomed to her role among the Varden and the dwarves. Phelan and her other companions were away, and she had a great deal of time to herself. She then told of how she spent most of it exploring Trondheim, wandering in the empty reaches of the city mountain, where others rarely tread. Just as Arya was about to show how she discovered her true name, The rate of memories slowed as she and the Naruto clone appeared to walk behind the younger Arya down a dusty corridor that was somewhere high in Trondheim. Just as the younger Arya was about to open a door, the two heard a disturbance from outside. Immediately ending the memory, Arya and the clone whirled in the direction of the noise, but relaxed when they saw it was only Eragon and Saphira. "Hey Aragon, Saphira, what are you guys doing all the way out here?" Clone Naruto asked as he waved at the approaching pair. "Hello Naruto and Arya. Saphira and I were just wandering around Du Weldenvarden, speaking to each other of our faults and strengths." Aragon replied, unwilling to tell them of his test, as he plopped down onto the grass, right next to the two. After doing so, Aragon looked back and forth between the two before asking, "So how about you two? What are the two of you doing so far away from Elesmera? Could it be you two were?" Aragon started to uncharacteristically wiggle his eyebrows at the close pair while Saphira rolled her giant eyes, already expecting the she-elf to start beating up her rider. To the dragon's surprise, Arya merely turned her head away, as in the elf's opinion, showing how she found her true name was far more intimate than whatever Aragon was implying. Clone Naruto chuckled at their interaction, already giving a thumbs up in his mind towards his boss and Arya. "Aragon, we were merely discussing about finding my boss's true name when Arya offered to share her memory about her experience with me. Oh, and I'm just a clone of the boss." The clone explained when he saw a question mark appear on top of Aragon and Saphira. "A clone." Aragon started before Clone Naruto explained the concept of shadow clones to the dragon rider pair. "Now that I think about it, I did sense an explosion of Naruto's life signs when I was fighting Phelan. Which is amazing considering how far away I was while fighting another dragon rider." Aragon remarked as he vaguely remembered the sudden increase in Naruto's life sign back at the Burning Plains, but discounted it in favor of keeping his head connected to his body during his fight with Phelan. "Aragon Finneral and Saphira, have you two been walking through Du Weldenvarden in the hopes of finding your true names by sudden inspiration?" Arya interrupted as she quickly got over her earlier embarrassment. Widening their eyes, the human and dragon pair were about to ask how Arya knew when the clone interrupted while rubbing the back of his head. "Well, I might have eavesdropped on the conversation between you guys and the Manoa tree. Ha ha ha," laughed the clone as Aragon and Saphira widened eyes turned into large perfect circles that indicated their disbelief, until they both rolled their eyes and just chalked whatever the clone did as another one of Naruto's insane abilities. "Hey Arya, since Aragon and Saphira are here to also find their true names, how about also showing them how you found yours?" the clone asked. Arya immediately sent a slight glare at the clone, clearly indicating her reluctance at sharing such a personal memory with either Aragon or Saphira. Catching the glare, Aragon immediately cut in before Arya could have a chance to protest at the clone. "Naruto, clone, I hardly think that's appropriate for Arya to share such a personal and revealing memory to just anyone, other than you Naruto. Besides, we can talk to Arya later about how she found her true name, rather than have her show us a memory of it." Standing up and starting to stride away with Saphira from the two, Aragon left with a simple farewell as he once again went into discussion with Saphira of what their true names could possibly be. Turning back to Arya, the clone once again held his hands out as he asked, "Shall we?" Looking at the offered hands, the elf uncharacteristically huffed as she moved her hands over his. Just as she was about to grasp his hands, one of her hands shot out to grab the clone's collar to drag his face towards hers. Looking deep into the clone's eyes, Arya said in a soft, yet steely tone, "What I am about to show you is something that I have never shown, or even expected to ever show to anyone, not even Phelan or my mother. So I hope that you realize how rude it was for you to offer my memories of finding my true name to Aragon. Telling how one found her true name is one thing, but showing memories is completely different." Knowing that he was in the wrong, the clone nodded in understanding after a few moments passed. When Arya saw that the clone understood what it did, she nodded as she let go of the collar and placed her hands on top of clone's and proceeded to show it her most treasured memories. Chapter 34, Mistake. The moment the clone and Arya touched hands, the elf gently guided the clone's consciousness into hers. Earlier, before the Battle of the Burning Plains and during one of Arya's lessons to Naruto, as she guided the blonde's mind to hers, her mind almost shut down from the raw power that his mind emanated the moment they touched. Since then, even after Arya taught Naruto how to limit his mind to not accidentally hurt hers, it was still painful for her to let him try to access her mind himself, which led her to the method of simply guiding a trace of Naruto's mind to hers. After Arya guided the clone's consciousness, the two once again appeared behind a younger Arya who was walking down a dusty corridor in one of the upper floors of Trondheim, where even sunlight could be seen. Soon, for no visible reason, the younger Arya stopped in front of a door that did not appear different from any of the countless doors of the giant dwarven city. As they watched the younger elf just stare at the door, Arya started to softly recount to the clone what she felt. As I walked through the high corridors of Trondheim, I came upon a door that was no different from the countless other doors of all the floors. Yet, for some reason, when I saw this door, I felt a strange pull, as if something was calling to me to go into this particular room. Arya stopped talking as they watched Memory Arya slowly open the door with slightly trembling hands, which stood out the most to the clone, since he knew how fearless and composed she could be, even in the face of torture of a shade. Narrowing his eyes, the clone closely observed the now opened room, looking for anything that stood out from a normal room. What he saw at first glance disappointed him, since the parts of the room that he was able to see were not different from the many rooms of Trondheim, other than a single beam of sunlight. Then Arya, who was beside him, pointed towards the ceiling where the beam of sunlight seemed to originate from. Following her finger, the Naruto clone looked up, only to widen his eyes at the odd phenomena. The ceiling from where the sunlight was coming from was completely solid, with no trace of a hole or window from where the sun could possibly shine through. As the Naruto clone was about to attempt to peek over the Memory Arya's shoulder to see what the beam of light was illuminating, the Arya beside him took his arm and gestured to walk around the Memory Arya. Nodding, he followed Arya and finally saw what the Memory Arya was staring so intensely at. It was a single flower with purple petals, a thorny stem, and a center that was like a drop of blood that appeared to grow from a stone pedestal in the middle of the room. The flower was unlike any other that the real Naruto had ever seen or heard of, whether it be from the elemental nations or from the many books he read from the library of Elesmera. As the Memory Arya blankly stared at the flower, the real Arya started speaking again. In all my years of traveling across Alagaezia, I have never seen or heard of such a flower, whether by sight or by word. But when I saw this flower and smelled its scent, something within me started to form. As I continued to stare at the flower, I saw everything, from how the odd beam of light touched the flower to how it was growing on top of a pedestal of pure stone. Arya then pointed at her past self as she appeared to have a blank look in her eyes. The Naruto clone then carefully walked around the Memory Arya to observe any changes that could occur. As he did so, Arya's face faintly flushed in embarrassment at the close attention the clone was giving to her past self. The state that Arya is in is actually quite similar to when I was about to enter Sage mode when I first started learning it. She is not moving at all, but I wonder what exactly is going through her mind at this moment. She did mention about observing her surroundings, but were those observations done during this odd state, or after? Well, I could do that, but I'm not sure it will work. I hope this works. After the Naruto clone ran through these thoughts, he suddenly extended a hand towards the Memory Arya as his eyes swirled into the Rinnegan. From the side, Arya watched as a shimmering layer of air surrounding the outstretched hand approached her past self's head. What is he doing? This is only a memory, so it is not possible to influence or even touch anyone or anything here, so what is he planning? Arya wondered as she started towards the Naruto clone. Naruto, what are you thinking of doing? She started until her eyes widened at the sight of the hand that was surrounded by shimmers making contact with her past self's forehead. That is, impossible. How can he possibly touch the past me that should not be solid? Arya wondered as another one of her fundamental beliefs was shattered in front of her. After thinking about it for a short moment, she came to a realization that ever since she met Naruto, many of her previously solid beliefs were constantly broken and that she was actually not too surprised at another one being shattered. Shaking her head, she was about to ask what he was doing before an odd sensation ran through her mind before gradually turning into a painful pounding. Gasping and swaying on her feet, Arya endured the pain as she shot Laoke at the clone that asked, why? As Arya began to become overcome with pain, the Naruto clone concentrated on using the Nintendo path of his eyes on the past Arya in front of him. Unlike the actual Naruto, the clone could only barely use the Rinnegan powers without puffing out of existence. The strain from using the powers of the eye regarded as those from a god was not one a simple shadow clone was able to easily handle, even from one as powerful as Naruto. Thus, the clone could not pay close attention to his surroundings as he immersed himself in the thoughts and feelings going through the past Arya's mind. When he came in contact with the thoughts that Arya had at that moment, he encountered a mental barrier that resisted his efforts to read those thoughts. As he probed the barrier, he thought, what is this? This does not feel like anything boss has encountered. It doesn't feel like the mental shields that I have previously felt from humans, Urgals, dwarves, or even elves, but rather from some primal force. I could break through it without much effort, but that could lead to intense pain to Arya, so that's not an option. All I need is to peek beyond the barrier. I don't have to completely crush it, just make a small hole to look through. I hope this works. The Naruto clone scrunched his eyebrows as he attempted to focus the power of the Rinnegan into a concentrated bundle of power on top of his fingertip. As he did so, he felt the barrier that was nearly impenetrable to others almost evaporate at the point of contact. As it did, faint words that he recognized as the ancient language started to pulsate across the rest of the barrier except for a small hole. Peeking through the hole, the Naruto clone saw an amazing sight. From the memory Arya's perspective, the entire room, including the flower, light, the surrounding walls, and even the very air were composed of words of the ancient language. While this made his eyes widen, what stunned him were that certain words in the surroundings started to light up and actually float towards him / past Arya and seemingly integrate into her. As they did, the Naruto clone could feel certain parts of Arya that were empty or missing were becoming occupied at a rapid pace. How interesting. From this, it would seem as if before discovering his or her true name, each person can be regarded as incomplete in regards to the ancient language, and only when certain conditions are met would they be filled and a true name discovered. From the thoughts that were running through her head at that time, one must know oneself almost completely while being in an environment that emphasized all of their characteristics, the good and the bad. Withdrawing the power of the Rinnegan and turning around, the Naruto clone started, Arya, I think I found, before stuttering to a stop when he saw the painful expression on the elf's face. Rushing over to her with an outstretched hand to help her, the Naruto clone exclaimed, Arya, what happened to? Before he could finish, a pale hand knocked his away with surprising strength. Steadying herself while shooting the Naruto clone a cold glare, Arya coldly said, whatever you did, clone of Naruto, almost caused my mind to collapse. Since you are only a clone of my friend, I will forgive you this once, but for now, begone. As she forcefully slammed the clone out of her consciousness before following. On the verge of puffing out of existence, the Naruto clone fell backwards as he was forcibly slammed out of Arya's mind. As he did, he thought about why the elf the boss was so close to would suddenly act so violently towards him. After a few seconds, he almost slammed his head against the ground when he realized the amount of pain the Nintendo path of the Rinnegan caused the target, regardless how gentle he was with the path. As Arya came to, he saw a look of hurt and betrayal in her eyes that was quickly hidden by a wave of pure black hair as she turned away and started to quickly stride away from him. Before she could get far, the clone rushed forward to grab her hand and spun her around to face him. But before he could utter a word, he froze as he watched a crystal-like tear slowly fall from the corner of one of her emerald eyes. Before the clone could start, Arya started coldly, Clone of Naruto, please unhand me now. As she shook her arm in an attempt to dislodge the clone's hand. Just as his hand was about to be dislodged, the clone blurted out, Arya, blame me, but don't blame the boss. None of this is his fault. When Arya slightly startled at the last statement, the clone took this chance to further explain. Arya, although I am a clone of the boss, he does not completely control us like puppets, rather we can act on our own while listening to his instructions in battle. The pain that I have caused you is completely my fault, but don't let this affect your relationship with the boss. The clone quickly explained as Arya stopped struggling and tilted her head down, hiding whatever look she had on her face. Then she softly began, it is not the pain that angered me, rather it was when you betrayed my trust by forcibly opening one of my, if not most important, memory without even asking me. If you had but asked, I would have said yes, and even if it caused double the pain, I would not have complained. But you did not. After this, she sighed as she suddenly slipped her hand out of the loosened grip of the clone. Striding a few meters away, the clone watched as Arya paused and said, do not worry, I will not blame Naruto War over this, just give me a little time. Before disappearing into the forest, the Naruto clone stared off in the direction that Arya went in before sighing, I really messed up, didn't I? Sorry boss. Before forming a cross and murmuring Kage Bunshin no Jutsu to inform Naruto of what he learned. Chapter 35, The True Name. The moment the clone in Elesmera popped another clone in order to relay what happened, the real Naruto was sparring with Kurama. Just as the blonde was about to dodge one of his friend's giant tails, he received the information from his clone, which horrified him enough for the apartment-sized tail to whack him into and through several mountains in the Kamui dimension. As Naruto flew through the air, he yelled out, "Damn it, Kurama!" which was punctuated by several coughs as he crashed through each new mountain. Snickering, the giant fox pounced forward to follow his host while wondering why Naruto didn't dodge his strike. As Naruto crashed through the last mountain, he stayed in man-shaped crater that he created for a moment while cursing the fact that his clone had essentially violated Arya's mind. Sighing and starting to climb out of the hole, he thought about the other part of the information the clone sent him. After temporarily shelving what his clone had done, he saw the state that Arya was in as she discovered her true name, which he realized was quite similar to when he first learned Sage Mode. Except that when he was trying to activate Sage Mode back then, he focused on emptying his mind completely while sensing and drawing in the nature chakra around him. Just how am I going to fix this? I really don't want to let this stand in the way, thought Naruto as Kurama landed not 10 feet away from the blonde who had just dusted himself off after climbing out of the hole. As he landed, a mushroom cloud of dust and dirt bloomed high into the sky as the blonde was once again covered in dirt. Before Naruto could yell out at the fox again, Kurama started, "Brat, what happened? Although I'm not complaining, you should have been able to easily dodge my attack." Summoning the wind, Naruto, for the second time dusted himself off as Kurama impatiently waited, while noting his friend's casual use of wind without any hand signals or words. His mastery over his main element has become even stronger to the point of not even needing external aid. While he still can't use it in a large-scale battle, he is close at it. It's only a matter of time. As Kurama mused over the evolving abilities of Naruto, he latter glared up at the fox before sighing and relaying what his clone found out about true names and lastly what happened with Arya. When Kurama heard about what his clone did to Arya, the fox actually frowned, which further reinforced how terrible an act the clone did to Arya. Just what should I do, Kurama? If somebody did something like that to me or anyone I knew, that person ceased to exist in less than a heartbeat. Naruto asked desperately as the woman he had feelings for could potentially despise him, and he couldn't blame her if she did. Oh, calm down, Naruto. Just what happened to the Hokage who almost never let anything ruffle him, not even when a man tried to ram the moon into the planet? What happened to person who took down and sealed a goddess within him? Naruto merely looked down at the ground as Kurama tried to shock him out of it. When it comes to love, that man died the moment I realized I was not a good husband and Hinata died right in front of me. I might not show it often, but when it comes to these types of bonds, I'm scared, old friend. I would rather fight Kaguya again than lose this kind of chance, and you know it. Kurama slowly nodded. If there was one major regret the blonde had, it was not spending enough time with Hinata, his wife, due to his Hokage duties and making her feel neglected and unwanted for so many years. Knowing that his shock therapy wasn't working, the fox attempted to distract his friend with the other subject. Kit, remember what your mate said. She does not necessarily blame you, only the clone. I'm sure that when you two actually talk, all will be resolved. And if she still does not understand, Kurama's eyes flashed red, then she does not deserve you. I always did find the elves to be similar to the Hyugas, with sticks up their asses. And I swear, if you continue to mope around, you'll soon become a full-blown Uchiha like a certain duck-butt-haired friend of yours. Maybe it's because of the eyes? Flashing his eyes up, Naruto glared heatedly at his giant tenant as he looked away while whistling innocently. Twitching his eyebrows, Naruto raised his hand and softly muttered, "Shinra Tensei." While focusing, and aiming the usually spherical force into a beam of pure gravitational energy right into Kurama's jaw, slamming it shut and causing the giant fox to flip over, causing a miniature earthquake as he landed back on the ground. Laughing at the sight, Naruto yelled out, "You done yet?" As Kurama instantly got back on his feet while growling at him, although relieved that Naruto was back to his usual self. Before anything else happened, Naruto raised his hand in an attempt to calm his partner down before informing what his clone had found out about the process of discovering true names. Kurama rubbed his furry chin as Naruto waited for the ten-tailed fox's response. He did not need to wait for long. "Kid, from what you told me, it would appear finding your true name means to completely understand yourself, both your strengths and weaknesses, your past and future, your fears and hopes, and possibly more. The surrounding environment might not be necessary, since we only know of one true name situation, but certain images or environments could resemble a person in his entirety, making him deeply reflect and speed up the process of finding his true name. Kurama concluded as Naruto nodded his agreement. Walking a short distance away, Naruto started his Kamui, which would take him out of his dimension. But before he left, he turned around to inform Kurama, "In any case, I will start meditating like I did when I first learned Sage Mode. Except this time, instead of completely emptying my mind, I will try to look deeper into myself. I suggest you to do the same, Kurama. Perhaps if you had known your true name, Madara might not have been able to control you with his Sharingan." Naruto left after giving his own advice while Kurama twitched his eye at the mention of Madara before looking off into the distance, wondering how a chakra construct like him could begin finding his true name. Appearing in a black swirl, Naruto stepped out onto the vessel that first brought him to Allegezia that was currently in the midst of a storm. Despite the raging winds and occasional lightning bolts of the storm, the deck of the boat remained dry and unmarked due to the seals that Naruto had placed beforehand. Turning back, Naruto yelled at the clone that was currently steering the boat, "Hey, how much longer to Doru Ariba? We've only been at sea for around a day, so it'll take maybe another week of traveling, boss. However, this storm came out of nowhere and is making it difficult to navigate there. I could have scattered it, but then I would have dispersed along with the storm and by then, it would be a pain to get pointed in the right direction." The clone responded as he fought the wheel for control against the violent waves. "You do know you could have just summoned a clone and have it dispelled to let me know about all this," Naruto said as he waved his hands around. "It wouldn't even be the first time I got rid of a storm, even if it was out of annoyance. I was about to boss, but then you came out of the Kamui." The clone responded as it fought the wheel for control against the storm. "Well, I might as disperse the storm now that I'm out here," Naruto said as he started to make hand seals. But then something within him stopped him, and he felt that if he scattered the storm now, he would forever lose something important to him. "Just what is this sensation that I'm feeling? It's just another storm, one I have seen hundreds of times, both on land and on sea. Yet, I sense some strange attraction towards it." Naruto's clone looked at his creator in confusion, wondering why he suddenly stopped his action towards the storm. "A strange sensation from something I have seen many times, could it be?" Naruto thought as he connected the dots. Placing a hand on the edge of the boat, Naruto deactivated the seals that kept the storm at bay with a burst of chakra. Instantly, the rage of the storm fell upon the vessel as it was lashed by a multitude of raindrops that were more like miniature bullets raining down from above. "Boss, what are you doing?" yelled the clone as it was immediately drenched. Naruto did not say anything and merely went to the bow of the boat, sat down while applying chakra so he would not fall off, and then went into meditation. The clone merely shrugged its shoulders and doubled its efforts to not go off course as it complained, "Just why is the boss that created me like this?" Within Naruto's mind, Kurama made his presence known. "Kid, what are you doing? Not that I care, but at this rate you might have to either fly or run to this Doru Ariba, because this boat is going to go down soon enough." The fox really did not care either way, since there was no real danger to his host even if the boat went under. But what concerned him was that Naruto did not even respond to him, which he found odd, since the blonde was always the most talkative out of the two. Now that he thought about it, the fox could not sense the blonde anywhere in his mindscape. Getting on his feet, he went out of the cave he napped in to see if he could find him. Suddenly, Kurama saw something odd forming on the ground of the landscape that Naruto had created for him. It was words that seemed to be coming from a certain place. "So that is what's happening, although you told me about it, never would have expected you to already find the answer. Truly, the most unpredictable shinobi, or person for that matter," Kurama muttered as he realized what was happening. Turning around, he went back into the cave to start napping again before sending out a thread of chakra to make sure the boat, while still exposed to the storm, would not sink. Meanwhile, Naruto was meditating and was oblivious to Kurama's yells. However, unlike when he went into sage mode when he was a teenager, he was more in a trance, and in that trance he felt as if he was not just seeing the storm, but rather the truth or the essence behind it. And in that moment, he felt a connection he had never felt before, between the storm and him. "I can see how similar I am to the storm. As unpredictable as the coming and going of the storm. As fast as the lightning that struck the ocean. As relentless as the pouring rain that showed no visible signs of ending. As ruthless as the piercing wind that could by itself blow his boat to pieces. But there is something deeper, isn't there?" Outside of Naruto's trance, the clone kept staring at his boss as it did its best to keep the boat on track to Doru Ariba. Inside, the clone was still complaining about all of the shit he and his brother creations had to put up with on an almost daily basis. Why can't we be summoned for something nice, like going swimming or going to a barbecue? Nope, instead we're always summoned as meat shields or to do something mundane like steering this ship through a damn storm. The clone complained as it glared a little resentfully at its creator, but soon let out a sigh as it turned its full attention back to navigation. For a few moments, nothing unusual happened as the clone successfully fought against the currents that sought to drag them under when suddenly, a strange pulse seemed to emanate in front of it. Whipping its head in Pulse's direction, the clone's eyes grew wide as it witnessed something spectacular. The rain, lightning, and wind of the storm that raged as far as a normal person's eyes could see were being concentrated around the still meditating Naruto and his vessel. Soon enough, a hurricane of titanic proportions that consisted of all of the elements of the storm formed around the drifting boat. All the stunned clone could say was, "Ah crap, not again." Before they were engulfed in the hurricane. What the ones on the boat didn't know was that the pulse of power, along with the appearance of the greatest hurricane in the history of Alexia, was far from being unnoticed to those back on the continent. While most magic users on the continent felt nothing, the more powerful humans, elves, and dragons certainly did. Chapter 36, Reverberations Through the Worlds. In the forests of Elesmera, Arya, Aragon, Oromiz, and their respective dragons prepared for war. Aragon and Saphira knew that it was too much to expect to find their true names before they had to get back into the fight. They knew, including Arya, that the next phase of the war would start within the next week if even that long. As Naruto meditated, Eragon and Arya stood around 10 meters from each other in preparation of a spar with Oromiz, Glade, and Saphira watching and observing the two. What they didn't notice was a certain clone that concealed itself in a nearby tree as it watched the two circle each other. Aragon stared at Arya as he slowly circled around the elf's left with his guard up, looking for an opening as she mirrored his movement. As they circled, Aragon speculated what Arya would do first. From what I remember, she will initiate the first strike, and most likely a slash at my neck. Aragon mentally sighed as he blinked. The moment he blinked, Arya took the opportunity to perform a chakra-empowered leap, instantly clearing the distance between them and slashed her thin blade at Aragon's neck. Aragon widened his eyes at the sheer speed she used to close the gap between them and the amount of force he could feel through the air as the blade came closer. Using his enhanced reflexes, Aragon backpedaled furiously in order to avoid the blow rather than block it, noticing that there was no way he could receive the slash with a last-second defense. Just what was that speed? I knew that even among elves that she's fast, but I've never seen her or any elf move this fast. And this power, just where is it coming from? Aragon thought as he desperately diverted a thrust that, if hit, would instantly skewer him through his stomach, wards or no wards. Soon enough, a flurry of slashes, chops, and stabs came his way. Most of those he could barely see or even react to despite the enhanced reflexes he received during the Agiti Bladron, forcing him to remain on the defensive. This can't go on, it's on a matter of time before she scores a hit on me, and when she scores that hit, it's going to hurt if what I've seen hits me. Aragon blocked another slash to his neck, which for some strange reason seemed to be the main target Arya was going for. Not much longer after that thought, Arya performed a feint from a slash to the neck to a stab to the right thigh which, thanks to the wards on her sword that blunted it, merely left huge bruise and a slight fracture on his femur. Yelping at the sudden pain, Aragon went down onto one of his knees before he widened his eyes at a downward chop that was coming right at his head. As he performed a combat roll to avoid being brained, Aragon thought about what happened in the spar so far. Just what is going on? Although this is a spar and injuries are expected, why is she radiating such killing intent that I have only seen on the battlefield? Although, when I did ask for a spar, she didn't appear to be in the best of moods. Barzel, why the neck again? Aragon hurriedly blocked the strike as he mentally screamed in exasperation when Arya once again tried to behead him with a blunted sword. Unbeknownst to Aragon, the mental condition of Arya was anything but stable as she slashed and stabbed at the poor rider. Why Naruto? How could you betray my trust so soon after promising to never betray me? Arya thought in anguish as the images of Naruto started to overlap that of Phelan as she unconsciously started to emit the killing intent that stunned Aragon. As the spar went on, the logical part of Arya's mind started to make itself known as her emotions stabilized throughout the fight. Calm down. From the look of horror on the clone's face, it was clear that he never meant for me to experience any sort of pain, if anything at all. Besides, this was just a clone. it is not fair to be angry at Naruto for what his clone did. He did mention that his clone sometimes retained his juvenile mindset. Arya parried one of the few blows that Aragon struck at her as she continued her train of thought, I will just have a talk with Naruto. If he were anyone else, I would never forgive him or her. And with that thought, she unleashed a stab towards her, one of Aragon's eyes that he was not prepared for due to his delayed reaction time from his fracture leg and the fact that Arya started pumping more chakra through her body, increasing her speed to or past the limits of elves. Noting that Aragon would not be able to block the potentially fatal blow, Arya frantically tried to hold back, but was not able to because of not being familiar with the large amount of chakra she used. The clone in the trees, Oromiz, and Glade all saw the dangerous attack and were startled, never having thought that Arya, the epitome of self-control, would do such a thing. Immediately, Oromiz started to cast words in the ancient language, but uncharacteristically swore when he noticed it would be too late. Immediately sprinting over, the elder elf attempted to interrupt the two but already knew that he would never make it in time. The only thing he could do was to break into Arya's mind, but he would never do that. The manners and customs of the elves were far too ingrained within him to even think about doing such a thing, not to mention the experience he went through when he was almost mentally broken by Galbatorix and his minions. As Oromiz sprinted, the Naruto clone in the trees prepared to perform the Kawarimi jutsu with either a floating leaf, piece of grass, or if needed a log, although even until this day, Naruto still had no idea where these logs came from. But before he could perform the jutsu, his left eye sent out a small shockwave throughout his body. Gripping his eye, the clone almost didn't notice until he saw a sword, from a very familiar elf, coming towards his face. Narrowing its eyes, the clone immediately intercepted the blow that would have dispersed him with his right index and middle fingers. Once there was no danger, the clone flashed his eyes to where he initially was. What was that? All of a sudden my left eye felt weird and the next moment, I'm almost made into a shish kebab by the lover of the boss. The clone started to make connections as it completely glossed over the fact Naruto and Arya still were not officially together. Finally, the clone's eyes widened as it realized what just happened. So Sasuke's beloved ability, Ameno Jikara, has also transferred to boss. Although for some reason, he never tried it, probably because he was still bitter over having the eyes of his best friend implanted into him and causing Sasuke to lose the rest of his vitality along with his eyes. However, that was only his left eye's ability, but what about the right eye? The clone sighed at the memory, knowing that it would take a while before its boss fully accepted that it wasn't his fault and that Sasuke would have preferred transferring his eyes rather than living for another year or two in a bed, while wondering what the right eye could do. Just as Aragon and the two elves were about to question how he instantaneously moved to block Arya's sword, a gentle pulse seemed to resonate through the air. The clone immediately whipped its head in the direction of Naruto, somehow feeling that its boss was behind the pulse. Almost instinctually, the clone sat down in a meditation posture and started to mirror what Naruto was doing on the other side of the continent. Seeing the odd action of the clone, the others in the clearing also turned their heads to see what the clone was startled about when another, but much stronger pulse ran through the air. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. Aragon, ignoring the pain in his leg and his recent near-death experience, stared in astonishment at the sheer power of the pulse and how it seemed to brush through his mental barriers as if they were not even there. But rather than fear, he only felt warmth and peace as it flowed through him without trying to pry into any of his memories or secrets. Instead, it cleared his mind and allowed him to truly observe himself without the bonds and responsibilities that he was burdened with at such a young age, and as he looked, he gained a better understanding of himself. Soon he closed his eyes as he looked inside of himself. Saphira had long made her way to her other half side after the clone stopped Arya's sword from skewering her partner. Being a creature that was far more connected to magic and chakra, she could feel what was happening so far away. Getting over her shock of the powerful pulse, she opened up the inherent bond she had with Aragon and gasped at the changes he was going through. After determining that none of the changes were harmful, she maintained the open connection and unconsciously coiled herself around her rider, closed her eyes, and allowed the strange force to run through her mind. Oromiz and Glade, with their centuries' worth of experience, knew exactly what was going on, but because of that were both far more astounded than either Aragon or Saphira. Glade, how could this be possible? While in the past there were several incidents where the awakening of one's true name affected the surrounding area, they were nothing compared to this. It is as if the entire continent, nay, the planet itself is responding to its call. Oromiz shuddered at the sheer power as more and more pulses started to reverberate through the air. But Oromiz, did you not feel the warmth of this force? Despite being so powerful, it does not feel as if the forest around us is fighting with itself or being corrupted. Rather, it's as if everything is sharing their energy with whoever is causing such a phenomenon. And I think we both know who it is. The old pair looked at each other before smirking. Naruto. Arya, who had dropped her sword after the clone stopped it, stood there, stunned by both the sheer power and the familiarity of the energy that was washing over her. Is that you, Naruto? Such power, and yet it is so warm, refreshing, and comforting. This is why I have already forgiven you, but, not that clone, we still have to talk about that. Just come back to me safely from Doru Ariha, and soon. Arya thought as she dropped to her knees, swearing that one day, she will bridge or at least narrow the gap between them. In the tower of Yubane, a man on a golden throne sat in silence as he felt the same pulses of power that those in all of Alagizia felt. But instead of feeling pleasant as the energy washed over him, he felt disgust and contempt towards it and whoever caused it. Such a nauseating feeling that I have not felt since the days of the Dragon Rider Order. Warmth, happiness, forgiving, all characteristics of the foolish and the weak. Only after complete domination of all of your foes and the destruction of your enemies can you call yourself strong. But this power is dangerous. I will have to take precautions. But should this person come, I will personally break him and make him my personal dog. Galbatorix started to darkly laugh as he imagined having such a powerful pet do his bidding. Yes, it will be so. But first, time to end this annoying war. Shuriken. Pale blue eyes opened up, shining with madness and insanity in the darkness over 100 feet high, as Shuriken awoke from his slumber, ready to share to the world his pain. Outside of Alagizia and on a large island, a small naive-looking brunette looked curiously in the direction of the pulses on top of a snowy mountain as something in the back of her mind screamed out at her to either end and then consume the possible threat or flee. But this thought quickly erased itself as tall, silver-haired man with a large broadsword strapped to his back appeared behind said girl and laid a hand on her shoulder, before asking, "What is it, Priscilla? Did you sense something?" Only for the now identified Priscilla to shake her head as she dismissed the energy pulses to head back into the lit house behind them, but not without a small and eager smirk on her face that belied her innocent outlook. Further aways, a young boy and a woman looked up into the sky to see a red comet flashing through the air before promptly disappearing from sight. Even further out, a fading spirit constantly flickered between many forms, eventually stopping in the form of a beautiful woman with red eyes and snow-white hair. If such a woman even slightly smiled, countless men and women would go down on their knees and beg to be her servants. But instead, she appeared exhausted with a heavy frown marring her otherwise perfect features as she mourned her situation. Suddenly, a wave of pure power swept through and around her, taking away the dark bags that were once beneath her eyes. Widening her eyes, the spirit turned towards the source and tried to get closer, but eventually hit a barrier that prevented any further advancement. Frowning, she tried again but eventually gave up and slumped to the ground and murmured, "Please, I cannot hold much longer, this is the final world for humanity, and I am so very tired." Chapter 37, I Am Not a God. As the pulses increased in frequency, the Naruto clone continued to meditate. After the elves and riders got over their initial shock, they looked back at the clone, wondering what it was doing. Oromiz and Glader knew that it was Naruto that was causing the current situation and were curious about why the clone itself was meditating. However, their questions were soon answered when suddenly, the clone's eyes opened, revealing a glazed-over look as its eyes had switched from their sapphire blue to the violet of the Rinnegan. Arya was the first to act upon noticing that the clone was not acting as its usual self and took a step towards it while disregarding her discomfort towards it before, asking, "Clone of Naruto, are you alright?" When the clone didn't respond, the others frowned as she took another step forward with an arm outstretched, intent on shaking the clone's shoulder. Before she could, however, the clone snapped its gaze towards her, and as it did, the hurricane that surrounded the original Naruto made itself known to all of Alagizia. Rapid winds roared throughout the land as a deluge of rain flooded the rivers of the continent. This was all accompanied by bolts of lightning that did not burn or set aflame grass or trees, but instead created craters wherever they landed, indicating the abnormality of the storm. Yet despite all of this, no harm came to anyone or any sentient being. And in the midst of the storm, the clone mouthed a string of words in the ancient language as the original did the same. I am the wind that will slice apart all barriers that stand in my way. I am the rain that will wear away all opposition. I am the lightning that will strike hard and fast to all those that stand in my way. For none shall stand between me and my way. Soon after mumbling these phrases, the Naruto's volume grew louder until it was as loud as his regular voice. I want to go home, and yet I also do not, for there is no one to go home to. All of them are either dead or dying and hardly anyone truly knows me. I tell myself that I am no god, just a human, but what kind of man can hold a goddess for so many years? I believe myself to be no monster, but what kind of man can kill thousands if not millions with one blow? How could some go pale with fright and despair when I merely lift a hand, yet some view that same hand as a symbol of love, hope, and security? If I had to choose whether to save the innocent, or save the ones I consider precious to me, what will I do? Naruto's voice grew deeper and stronger as he questioned who he was, laying bare to all that could hear, his hopes and dreams, his fears and insecurities. It brought up the questions that he always had, but were shoved to the side in order to better operate as the shinobi and Hokage Konoha and the elemental nations needed. And as he did, his voice grew to a roar that could have been heard for miles if it weren't for the hurricane that only grew larger and larger as it seemed to absorb the wind, rain, and lightning that swept through Allegezia. I am a human, yet not a human. I am a man, yet not just a man. I am a god, yet not a god. I am the darkest fear to some, but the brightest hope to many others. I am the defender of the innocent, but will abandon everything to protect my loved ones. The glaze that covered Naruto's and his clones' eyes soon faded as they discovered what kind of person Naruto was. However, the two became troubled when they realized that there was no word in the ancient language that defined an important part of him, chakra. The original Naruto could feel that if he could not get over this obstacle, then the true name he was so close to finding, may just fade away. As the two meditated, a word suddenly made itself known, a word that seemed to encompass the entirety of the ancient language. When it revealed itself, Naruto somehow knew that this word was the name of the ancient language. Could this be the name of the ancient language? The word which has been missing centuries ever since the gray folk disappeared. How interesting. I bet if I let Arya or Oromiz know of this, they would never stop asking me questions about it. But although I trust them, if the name became widely known, all magic would be rendered useless, and from I have learnt from the library of the elves, a catastrophe worse than whatever Galbatorix could come up with would occur, and that is something I don't want to see. The blonde pondered as he came up what he thought was a bright idea. I know, if I can't find a suitable word, I'll just create one. Back in the mindscape and in a cave, Kurama observed everything that was happening since the start of Naruto's true name awakening. When he first observed the pulses and the words of the ancient language scurrying across the landscape towards wherever Naruto was, he became enlightened on certain things. Imitating Naruto, the giant fox sat in a meditation stance, much like when he gathered nature chakra for Naruto when he had fought against Sasuke so long ago. However, after a few moments, Kurama grumbled as he went back down onto his belly, this just isn't working. I guess meditation is just not for me. Might as well continue watching the show, although I have a feeling that the brat is about to do something either utterly stupid or pure genius. Coming to this conclusion, the original Naruto exited his meditation stance to stand up on the prow. Unconsciously, Naruto started to unlock some of the many seals that restricted his chakra, and as he did so, the pressure around him increased to the point that the storm itself stilled, with the ocean beneath him forming a funnel as water was forced away from him. Lifting his head to the storm sky, Naruto uttered in the ancient language as his Rinnegan became more and more luminescent, in the name of the ancient language, I, Naruto Uzumaki, add a new word, chakra. And in the name of the ancient language, this word shall be hidden for all time except to those I tell it to. The moment he made the declaration, Naruto could feel as if the chakra within himself, which he already felt was a living being, suddenly come to life with a roar that only he himself could hear. Looking at his body, he could see, with his Rinnegan eyes, the rapid changes that should have taken years if not decades happening to his chakra pathway system. He looked in awe as his chakra, which was already dense, become at least 2x denser. The chakra pathways that were once entirely distinct from his muscles, bones, and organs seemed to integrate directly into them. If a Byakugan user had taken a single look at him, rather than seeing a chakra pathway system, he or she would have instead seen a mass of chakra, similar to the Bija themselves, except still having blood, muscle, and bone. But it was not the physical changes that startled Naruto the most, but rather the new intimacy that he felt with his own chakra and the surrounding chakra. Closing his eyes, Naruto gave a sigh as he whispered, "So this is what it feels to know myself. Not only has my chakra capacity doubled, even its potency has increased drastically. I already have the same capacity as Kurama did with both his yin and yang halves, but with the increased concentration." Suddenly, another voice entered his mind, but it was not the gravelly voice that he associated with Kurama. "Congrats boss. But do you mind resealing yourself? I can feel your power all the way here in Elesmera, and it's overwhelming." Naruto twitched his eyebrows as he recognized it was the clone he left with Arya and Aragon, before he froze. "Wait a sec, we're able to mentally communicate." The clone cringed as its head started ring from the astonishment that it heard from its boss. "Apparently, after you found your true name, it seems like us clones are now able to communicate mentally with each other and you," informed the clone as the real Naruto raced through the possibilities that this new ability opened up. Before he could further communicate with the clone, an annoyed voice grumbled its way into their minds, "If you are done talking to your clone, get back onto the boat before it sinks and get over into your kamui." The two rolled their eyes as they ended their mental connection, and Naruto, for the first time, realized that they were currently in free fall in the funnel of the ocean that he had previously formed. Hurriedly, he reactivated the seals on the boat that originally prevented it from sinking and watched as the ocean started to rapidly collapse on itself, refilling the void that was once devoid of water. "Boss, what about me?" asked the clone that was still steering the boat. Performing the kamui, Naruto looked back at the clone that was still steering the boat. Suddenly, he gave a wide smile. "You didn't really think I didn't hear you or your thoughts, did you?" With its eyes wide, the clone watched as Naruto disappeared into the kamui and as tons of seawater approached it and the boat in all directions. "Well, Shikaden the clone didn't get a chance to finish before it desperately performed the Kaden of the gentle fist style in order to stay in the world. Ha, that should teach my clones to speak behind my back." "Oi, Kurama, what did you want?" laughed Naruto as he went towards the cave that he knew the ten-tailed fox usually napped in. "Humph, so you found your true name, and even created a new word in a language that apparently controls everything on this primitive continent. Anything else?" Kurama snorted as he poked his head outside his cave. "I sure did," Naruto proclaimed happily until he saw the slightly upset look on his friend's face. "Wait a sec, don't tell me, did you also try to discover your true name, but couldn't?" When the second Juubi snarled at him, Naruto doubled over in laughter as he pointed at the fox. "Was it because you're still hung up about your rabbit?" Before he could finish the light-hearted insult, he looked with wide eyes as multiple Bijudama formed at the end of each of Kurama's 10 tails and at his mouth, each easily able to wipe out continents, with all of them pointed directly at him. "Oh come on!" Naruto muttered as he immediately activated his wards, went through a few hand seals and activated his Preta path on the interlocking wooden pillars that appeared after he yelled out, "Mokuton, Mokujahiki." Not a moment later, the Kamui dimension was bathed in white light without a single shadow. When the dust settled, Kurama looked in satisfaction at the broken surface of the jutsu that had in the past deflected his Bijudama with ease, came into view as the dust slowly settled. Then he saw purple orbs that shined with annoyance, followed by a slightly ruffled-looking Naruto with his seals undone. Before Naruto could counterattack, Kurama abruptly coughed. As I was about to say, I wanted to ask, how exactly did you find your true name? The benefits you received were terrifying, which is an understatement by the way. Just on the surface, can tell that your body is closer to that of a bijou, just that you still have blood, muscle, and that other mushy stuff that makes you a human. No doubt, if it weren't for your Uzumaki cells, you would have probably turned into a humanoid bijou, unable to improve physically or chakra-wise without much difficulty. This is completely unlike what we read about true name awakenings. For others, their power did not generally increase, and even if they did, it was not by much. Naruto glared up at the giant fox for a moment longer before nodding his agreement. "I agree with you, the improvements I have gained after being enlightened is mind-boggling, but I think I know the answer to this," he answered as he relayed over what happened to Kurama. The giant fox shuddered as he felt chills going down his spine as he remembered what the blonde said. "I am a god, yet not a god." It was one thing to casually say one had the power of a god, but it was completely different when said in the ancient language that did not allow for lies. "If Naruto is a god, then I can be no less. I am Kurama, the eldest and most powerful of the bijou, and now the Juubi. I will not allow a human, even if it is Naruto, to trump me in anything." And with that vow, there appeared a small subtle shift within the fox, but not enough for anyone to feel anything. The two remained silent in the Kamui dimension until Naruto suddenly cried anime tears. Because my chakra is suddenly 2x greater and denser and my chakra pathways changed, my control is shot to hell again. No. Kurama just facepalmed at his container's misfortune. Here we go again. Sighed the fox as he retreated back into his cave and closed his eyes. Chapter 38, More Training. Back in Elesmera, the clone shook his head in exasperation at his creator's antics when he realized that his chakra control had once again got screwed up. Then it almost dispelled when all of a sudden, tens of thousands of minds appeared, instantly filling all of the clones' minds with each other's thoughts. Instantly, all of the training clones and the clone in Elesmera closed the mental link between them before they were overwhelmed. Well, that's going to take a while to get used to. The clone groaned as it gripped its head. Hey/Naruto Finierol/Naruto, are you alright? Three voices made themselves known when they saw the clone suddenly grip its head. It's nothing much, don't worry about it. The clone waved a hand at Arya, Aragon, and Oromiz to indicate that nothing was wrong. However, Aragon and Arya, come over here. The clone chuckled when he saw imaginary question marks appear over their heads as he held out his hands, indicating the two to hold them. Aragon and Arya looked at each other before Aragon soon did what the clone wanted. Arya on the other hand, hesitated a little before also giving her hand. The moment they did, the clone performed a few shunshins to another clearing several miles away from where they came from. Oromiz and Glade just looked in amusement as Saphira hurriedly leapt into the air to follow her rider. Well, old friend, I have a feeling that Aragon is about to learn something that we do not know. Oromiz sent through their mental link before turning back to his hut to further prepare. When the clone stopped and let go of the two's hands, Aragon and Arya wobbled and stumbled as they slowly got over their first time traveling via shunshin. Hey, you two good? The clone laughed at their clumsiness while the human and elf pair simply glared in annoyance at the laughing clone. Nah, are you two? Arya started to complain after she recovered first, having experienced as she started to glow green. Immediately, the clone stopped laughing as one of Naruto's few weaknesses, righteous female fury, especially from someone he obviously cared about as more than a friend, was starting to happen right in front of it. The clone immediately dropped to its knees. Forgive me, Arya. It was just a prank. The clone muttered the last word softly. Aragon just sat on the grass, shaking his head at both the dizziness from the shunshin and the antics of the two. To think they haven't gotten together yet, unbelievable. It must be because of their age. Before either could say anything more, the clone held out a palm. Before either of you ask anything, I brought you both here to train and hopefully help Aragon find his true name. While Aragon widened his eyes in anticipation and excitement, Arya slightly narrowed her eyes, feeling that the clone left something out. But we only have a week or two at the very most before we must go back to the war. Just how much can you even teach us within such a short amount of time? Aragon questioned as he knew from experience that a couple of weeks was far from enough to make a difference. Arya nodded in agreement, knowing that, if Naruto taught what she expected, it would take at least a month before what he taught could be applied to the battlefield. To her surprise, Naruto also nodded. That would be correct, Aragon. If it was only 2 weeks, even I could barely teach you two anything. However, what if it was not just 2 weeks? The clone grinned at the looks of confusion Aragon and Arya displayed, which soon turned to that of shock when it suddenly slapped its palms together before placing both on the ground and yelling, Jiken Kikucho, Fuin. The two soon-to-be students watched in astonishment as strange ink symbols raced through the clearing, along the trees, and was about to enclose the sky when a blue comet slipped past the ceiling barrier before it was fully closed and isolated. The clone eyes bulged as a massive amount of chakra was taken from it in order to compensate for the extra, and very much unintended guest. Saphira? What are you doing here? Aragon looked confusedly at the gleaming sapphire dragon before he was again put under the boot, or in this case a heavily armored dragon foot for the second time in his life. Fool! Are you really asking me such a question? How about you think about it, think? Saphira roared in their mental link as Aragon winced, his head echoing with the anger and annoyance of his partner. Sorry Saphira, I didn't mean to leave you alone. The clone over there didn't really give me much time to recover after being dragged along. But at least you're here. Saphira merely snorted as Aragon attempted to push some of the blame on the clone. but in the end calmed down quickly since she was mostly annoyed and not angered at being left behind. Although I understand you wanting to follow Aragon, I really wish that you had stayed outside the barrier, said the clone weakly. When it saw Saphira's uncomprehending stare, it continued, if it was just Aragon and Arya, I could have sustained 4x times seal for these 2 weeks, but with you added, now I can only sustain a 2x times seal and after that I might just disperse from lack of chakra. Although the dragon didn't change her opinion, she did express some measure of guilt by awkwardly looking away. Anyways. Now that everything is set up, how about we get to actual business? Oh, this is going to be so much fun, and don't worry Saphira, I have something special planned for you ho ho ho. The clone's eyes gleamed as he widely grinned, sending chills down everyone's spine, even Arya's despite her knowing what kind of training was coming. 1 week later in real time, the 12 elven spellcasters that Queen Islanzati had sent out earlier before the Battle of the Burning Plains arrived at the Varden encampment with the message that the elves were on the war path towards Sunan and from there, Gilead. Ajihad immediately notified the rest of the Varden to start the march to Feinster, which he estimated to take 3 weeks for the large army as he went out to greet the welcomed reinforcements. Before the elves could leave to get some rest, Ajihad asked, what is the situation with Aragon? When can we expect him back? The lead elf, a male named Blodgarm that had wolf-like fangs, blue fur, and yellow eagle eyes, turned around to answer and question. Aragon Fineral is currently training with the one you call Naruto. The last updates Queen Islanzati received from Elesmera indicated that Aragon has greatly increased in strength, almost as much improvement after the Agiti Blodron. Saphira Brightscales has also somehow greatly increased in size, far more than is normal at her age. Just who is this Naruto? Ajihad, Hrothgar and the other commanders paused and turned to each other as they digested and made plans for the upcoming battles. The black leader then thought of what to reveal about Naruto, as after seeing the blonde's display of power, he really did not want to reveal too much and annoy him. Otherwise, instead of the Empire being annihilated, it might even be them. The leader of the Varden then carefully observed the elf as he decided which parts of Naruto he should tell him. I myself do not know much about Naruto, other than he is not from this continent and that he is probably one of, if not the most, powerful person here, surpassing even you, the elves, if you do not mind me saying. In addition, he is not one to ever turn his back on a comrade or a cause he believes in. Other than that, there is not much else I know. Ajihad finally answered as he kept most of the details that Naruto revealed to him carefully observed the reactions of the elves. He tensed when he saw the slightly unsatisfied expressions on the faces but soon relaxed when the blue elf nodded his acceptance and turned to leave with the rest of his companions. As they left, Ajihad turned to Jormungandr, his second in command. Jormungandr, I want you to take 5,000 men and take Arufs. We cannot afford to be flanked by possible Empire reinforcements behind us as we continue on to Feinster. Once Arufs is captured, leave at most 100 men to keep order in the city before joining with the rest of the Varden. I will lead the rest of the men to Feinster. Although Feinster is one of the smaller cities of the Empire and should be relatively simple to capture, I have a feeling that Galbatorix has upped the security of the cities leading towards Yorubain. As Jormungandr nodded his understanding and turned to leave, Ajihad called over to him, you have 2 weeks at the very most to capture Arufs, remember that. As you command, Ajihad. Jormungandr saluted as he went towards his men to prepare for the siege. Soon the entirety of the Varden began to ring with sharpening of blades, the trampling of boots, and the yells of men as the rebels prepared to move out. Meanwhile, Aragon was currently standing foot deep in a man-made lake created by none other than the Naruto clone and was being watched by the other 3, the clone, Arya, and a greatly enlarged Saphira. All 3 watched as they saw Aragon push chakra to the soles of his feet, forming a thin blue barrier that, while a bit unstable, started to allow him to rise to the surface. Saphira, who was now almost the size of Glade but still retained her streamlined form, watched in excitement as she saw her rider starting to develop one of the abilities that Naruto had shown when the dragon rider pair first met. When she saw that Aragon had successfully stood on top of the water without sinking for a few minutes, she thought back to what Naruto did to her that let her have such a sudden growth spurt. Flashback. 1 week into the training, Saphira was watching Aragon and Arya practicing their chakra control exercises with Aragon trying to run up a tree and Arya wobbling on water, when she saw in the corner of her eye the clone. Hey Saphira, how are you doing? I know it must be boring just staying inside the barrier without being able to fly much. The clone asked as he walked over until he was beside her head, which was currently laying on her two front feet. I am happy that Aragon is getting training from you, and I can feel just from feeling his mind how much stronger he is in regards to his chakra reserves. I can also feel that he is slowly using less and less chakra to cast his spells, which is actually the best improvement so far. However, Saphira mentally communicated with the clone, I just feel so useless. While in here, all I can do is watch and see Aragon and Arya grow stronger, but only I am not improving. Even though I did beat the red dragon, he was only a hatchling in experience while I have been through several fights and battles. But it is not good enough when I finally go against Shuriken, I am not enough. Saphira watched as Aragon again fell onto his back after failing to stick to the tree with his feet until she guiltily looked away. Sighing, the clone ran a hand through its hair as it soon realized that despite her size and wisdom, she was still but a child when it came to the number of years she lived outside of her egg. Finally, the clone came to a decision. Saphira, there is a method to make you stronger, but the thing is, I don't know if it'll even work, or whether it could even harm you. Back home, there were sentient and talking animals that we called summons, and the most powerful of them could grow to the size of literal mountains. And they weren't dragons. They were animals you would never have expected, toads, snakes, and even slugs. Compared to them, I can see that your chakra pathways are all chaotic, which is probably the reason why you have little to no control over your power. I might be able to change it, but unlike Oromiz, this condition has been a part of your race since day one, so I could very well cripple instead. The choice is yours. The Azure Dragon stared into the clone's eyes before switching her gaze towards Aragon. She observed that no matter how many times Aragon failed, he always kept going to the point of exhaustion, doing everything possible to be Galbatorix's match. Making up her mind, she looked back at the blonde, I will do it. I cannot be the only one to fall behind. Hearing her decision, the clone placed its right palm with the sun symbol on Saphira's head as he prepared to use most of its chakra. Close your eyes, this might hurt. Soon after Saphira closed her eyes, the clone placed the sun symbol over her head and slowly connected the chakra pathways starting from her head, one by one. Eventually, the dragon could not keep her pain from spilling into the mental bond she shared with Aragon. When it did, Aragon immediately whipped his head and ran towards his other half, ignoring the bruises he had formed after falling off the tree dozens of times. Naruto, what are you doing to her? Aragon demanded, knowing that the clone would never do anything to intentionally harm her, but still worried when he felt the amount of pain coming through the bond. He grew more worried when the clone did not answer his question, but instead continued to channel chakra through his palm to change the very structure of Saphira's body. Before Aragon could possibly separate the two, Saphira sent an urgent message through their link, Little one, do not interrupt us. I might be in pain, but I can already sense myself getting stronger. Do not worry about me, I will be fine. Continue your training, we only have 3 weeks left, if even that long. The dragon rider hesitated, but eventually decided to respect his dragon's decision. Aragon began to leave to continue the tree climbing exercise, however he patted Saphira's head to comfort her. While he did not want Saphira to go through so much pain for power, he did understand her determination and somehow knew that in the end, the one to truly confront Galbatorix and Shuriken would be him and Saphira. 2 hours later, the clone took his hand off Saphira's head and slumped to the ground, completely exhausted and almost at the point of dispersing. The moment he did, Saphira also dropped to the ground with a thud as Aragon and Arya sprinted towards the tired duo. Aragon beside Saphira's head as Arya went down to the slumped clone to stabilize it. An hour passed before Saphira opened her eyes again, and the first thing she saw was a worried Aragon looking her over. With an amused shake of her head, she nuzzled her rider before relaying through the mental bond, I am alright little one. Although I feel sore right now, I feel so much more powerful and in control of the chakra running through my body. So. She would have kept going but was stopped by the ridiculous sight of Aragon's and even Arya's jaws hanging wide open. Before she could ask, the clone that awakened earlier chuckled. Saphira, maybe you should try again, but this time don't only pay attention to your bond with Aragon. The clone walked off as it went to plan how to find Aragon's true name. With a confused gaze, Saphira once again repeated what she said, but this time she too had a silly expression on her face when she realized that instead of just thinking it, she actually said it out loud. How is this possible? Just as the dragon was about to further question her new abilities, the clone yelled out at the other end of the clearing. Just as the dragon was about to further question her new abilities, the clone yelled out at the other end of the clearing. I might have forgotten to tell you, that the summons in my land were somehow able to speak, dunno how or why, but it was certainly helpful. The dragon rider pair comforted each other as they discovered the fact that the chakra reserve Saphira had grown from what Naruto called mid-chunin to mid-jonin, a substantial increase that soon made itself known when she felt an overwhelming urge to expel the excess energy and roared out a massive plume of pale blue flame that bordered on white. Out of sight, the clone grunted as it felt another part of its chakra drain in order to keep up the time barrier. Can't she give me a break already? I'm already on the brink of dispelling from including Saphira within the barrier and now I'm preventing it from breaking apart, ungrateful brat. The clone muttered as it continued to plan on how to awaken Aragon's true name. Flashback end. The three continued to watch as Aragon started to stably walk on the surface on the water, smiling at the young rider's expression of awe and joy at doing what he once thought was simply impossible. But as quickly as the clone smiled, it immediately frowned once it received a mental message from the original Naruto. Sensing something wrong, the two beside him looked at him with questioning looks. Boss has arrived on the shore of Vromgard. The questioning looks soon switched to those of understanding and slight alarm. Do you think you will be alright? Arya questioned as the clone merely smirked in response. Of course, it's the boss. Chapter 39, Vromgard. Naruto was currently training his chakra control that was almost back to what it was originally before he found his true name in his Kamui dimension when the clone steering the boat sent a mental message. We're here boss, and at first glance, it looks terrible. Naruto initially smiled at the clone's message until he heard the last part. Frowning, he muttered Kamui to exit and was greeted with a sight that made him wonder what exactly happened to the island. Maybe I should have read the book Oromiz gave me before I left, but I got completely distracted after I found out my true name and the resulting training I needed to get used to my new chakra. Naruto sheepishly rubbed the back of his head as he just remembered about the book and warnings Oromiz had given him before leaving. Pulling out the book from one of his many seals, Naruto activated his Rinnegan to speed-skimmed the book that should have taken at least a day to finish in mere minutes. As he flipped the last page, he sighed at what turned the island to the way it currently was. According to the book, Vromgard was a paradise for both dragons and their riders. The island was a beautiful, full of evergreen forests that covered its 5 mountain ranges, golden sand beaches, blue skies and clear water. The capital of the dragon riders, Doruariba, was a magnificent city, situated around a lake that laid within the valley of the 5 mountains with centuries-old architecture marvels that could house even the largest of dragons, who approached the size of some of the bijou, if the records could be believed. However, this all ended with the rebellion of Galbatorix and his Forsworn. At the end of the battle, one of the dragon riders that had lost his dragon apparently blew himself up and completely decimated the island, but failed to kill any of the enemy except for one of the Forsworn. But now, the island just looks dead. It's as if the very color and life was leached from the place. The sands are bone white, the forests, while still there, are shrouded by a gray fog and even the sky above is covered with such thick clouds that the sun can barely pierce through. Naruto sadly thought as he walked along the beach and into the fringe of the forest where the gray fog started. Soon, he felt something foreign trying to enter his body, but such object in question was instantly eliminated upon contact with the chakra in his skin. The blonde frowned as he noted that the gray fog was still poisonous after all these years as mentioned in the book. Even now, the fog is still poisonous. Just what exactly did that idiot rider do? He not only killed the rest of his order, but even rendered the entire island uninhabitable. But the past is the past, time to see this Doruariba. Naruto muttered to himself as he shunshined through the forested mountains to reach the valley that held the remains of the dragon rider's capital. Several minutes passed before Naruto stood at the edge Doruariba and what he saw both stunned him and saddened him. Immense buildings that could have easily encompassed a small town dotted the valley along with enormous caverns whose depths could not be seen. Once great towers that rivaled the height of the Hokage rock back home were common to the point the valley floor was hardly visible. But rather than gleaming structures and clean roads, all that was left of the mighty structures were blackened stone walls that were drowned in lichen and moss of every color and the decaying corpses of humans, elves, and dragons. This city in the past would have outrivaled any of the hidden villages back in the elemental nations, but because of a single group of mad men, all that's left is death and decay. Naruto slowly shook his head as he moved deeper into the dead city. Along the way, he encountered the many corpses of the Dragon Rider Order and truly witnessed just how large some of the buildings were. The largest of the buildings were big enough for Kurama when he was the Kyuubi to comfortably sleep in. But it was when he came upon a particular skeleton that truly stunned him. "Oi, Kurama, look at that skeleton. From the size of those ribs, that dragon would have been as large as you were when you were the Kyuubi." Naruto heard the fox snort in contempt as he told him about the dragon skeleton. Humph, despite how big he was, he must have been weak to have been defeated by a much younger Galbatorix and his forsworn. "If it were me, I would have annihilated all of them without any trouble, even when I was just the Kyuubi no Kitsune." Kurama bragged as Naruto merely chuckled at his friend's huge ego. Soon, Naruto arrived at the southern edge of Doruariba and raised an eyebrow at a crater that was around 30 feet deep and wide. It would seem that it was here that the rider blew himself and everyone else on the island up. Impressive, the crater is about as big as my old raisin shuriken, except it also generated this mist that seems poisonous to all living things that are not plants. Naruto stared at the crater a while longer before shrugging, while he was curious on how exactly the rider caused such devastation. He had seen far worse when Pain had unleashed a massive Shinra Tensei on Konoha. Going back to the gigantic skeleton of the deceased dragon he had found earlier, Naruto sat on top of the skull which was as large as Saphira before her growth spurt and began to accept the nature chakra that always tried to enter him. Soon his eyes turned golden as he entered Sage Mode Level 1. Closing his eyes, Naruto searched the entire island for any signs of Eldenari or other chakra signals that might have gone unnoticed by either rider or Galbatorix. Instead, all he found were a few weak chakra signals that he eventually found out were the few animals and organisms that had mutated to survive in the poisonous fog. When he did not find chakra signals that could be signs of Eldenari, he sighed in frustration and was about to stop when suddenly, he came upon an odd area that he almost missed. What is that? There's a certain area that seems to eject the very presence of chakra, yet I almost missed it, how unusual. Naruto quickly stood and shunshined over to the area. As he did, he passed more giant buildings that could have each stored a small village. But when he eventually came upon the area, it was not a building, but rather a 200-foot jagged rock amongst a grove of apple trees that he discovered was the source of the oddity. So this is the source, I didn't expect it to be a rock. Naruto chuckled as he activated his Rinnegan to get a better look at the seemingly innocent rock. But what came next completely surprised him. Expecting to see little to none chakra around the rock, he instead saw a large amount of it coming not from the rock, but from underneath while the surrounding chakra was forced away from the rock. Whipping his head towards the base, he narrowed his eyes as realized that whatever made the rock unusual, it was coming from underground. Man, I wished I had the Byakugan now. With it, I would have been able to easily see what exactly was going on, but now how should I go around with doing this? I could just pick the damn rock up, but then there might be spells that could destroy whatever was under it, which must be important to come up with something so complex as rejecting all incoming chakra but yet allowing such a large amount of it to come out which I almost missed, when I should have easily detected. What to do, what to do? Naruto stared at the rock as he mused on how to go about this without potentially destroying whatever laid underneath. Pulling out the book, he went for a second read, except this time, actually read through it rather than just skimming it. From what I read in the book, this rock is called the Rock of Kuthian. What the? Naruto jerked back and resealed the book when he saw the once disorganized chakra that was emitted from under the stones suddenly target him, in particular his mind. Roaring out in anger, Naruto attacked back with his mind, forcefully shattering the incoming chakra that, from what he could tell, attempted to erase parts of his memory. Although the initial burst of chakra soon ended, a steady trickle still tried to alter the blonde's memory, but not nearly enough that he had to pay attention to its now pathetic attempts. What the hell was that? The moment I mentioned, no just thought, about the Rock of Kuthian, the near-dormant chakra suddenly tried to erase the memory from my mind. But why? Are the things beneath this rock really that important? Naruto thought for a moment about what to do before coming to a decision. Well, I don't want to accidentally break something that could prove useful to Aragon, and he's going to need all he can get if Galbatorix is even half as strong as he made to be. Might as well see if my clone in Elesmera can get me more information. Naruto communicated with his clone as he sat down to wait and mentally sighed, I wish I could go back now to see Arya. But although I already miss her, I feel she needs some space to vent for now. The clone was watching Aragon and Arya as they sparred on top of the man-made lake it had created. It chuckled as Eragon's attention slipped and he slightly dipped beneath the water up to his ankles before stabilizing his footing in time to dodge Arya's favorite strike, a beheading slash. The clone was about to stop the spar since it could see how exhausted the young dragon rider was when Naruto's message ran through its head. Hey, could you ask Aragon or Oromiz about the Rock of Cuthien? There might be something important under it, but I don't want to trigger spells that I can't reach from the surface. Nodding in confirmation, the clone made its way up to the still dueling pair, and just as Aragon was about to capitalize on one of the rare openings that Arya showed, the clone yelled out, "Aragon, do you know the Rock of Cuthien?" Promptly after that declaration, Aragon completely lost his attention and instantly sank into the water. Arya merely looked amused at the action before she sheathed her sword and jumped back onto dry land. Sputtering, Aragon soon emerged from the water and mirrored Arya by also jumping out of the lake and onto the grass, although less gracefully due to getting soaked. After he dried himself with a spell, he rounded on the clone, not in anger as it expected, but rather in joy and excitement. "Did you say the Rock of Cuthien? Are you absolutely sure you got the name right, and how and where did you find that name?" "I've been looking everywhere for that name." Saphira shared her excitement with her rider since the two have been annoyed at the lack of information on the Rock of Cuthien despite combing through many books in the Elven Library. The clone quickly went through the events of what happened in Doru Ariba as his audience listened in rapt attention, as none of them, not even Arya, had ever stepped foot on the legendary Dragon Rider's Island. Then it got to the part about the Rock of Cuthien. After following the well-hidden chakra anomaly, the boss came up on this really large rock that was within an orchard of apple trees. Wondering what it was, he went through the book again before finding mention about the Rock of Cuthien. The moment the clone mentioned about the rock, it shot its head up in time to see two strands of chakra that were aiming at both Arya and him. Frowning, the clone soon noticed that the two strands were exactly that, mere strands compared to what happened on the island, and could not even breach the time barrier it had set up. "Clone of Naruto, what happened?" Arya also looked up at the sky, but upon only seeing the usual barrier with ink symbols, she questioned the clone, not understanding the sudden frown that marked its face. "So it happened again," muttered the clone before looking at the trio who were giving it blank looks, when the boss even threw about the Rock of Cuthien. The chakra that was emanated beneath it suddenly targeted him in an attempt to erase all mention of the name from his mind. Of course, the clone looked at Arya when she started to lean a bit more forward after the attempted attack on Naruto. "Nothing happened, as he's too powerful for his own good, which makes me pretty powerful as well now that I think about it." The trio sweat dropped as he heard the clone start to mutter about world domination and possibly implementing ramen as an object of worship before Aragon reached out and poked the clone. Naruto? Could we get back to what happened at the rock? You can go plan your ambitions later." He flinched when the clone suddenly stilled before slowly turning its face towards the voice. He, nobody must know about my plans, not even the boss. Prepare for your doom." The clone started to reach out towards Aragon before it was quickly knocked over the head by the sheath of a certain elf. Dropping down, the clone rubbed its head as it pouted back at Arya before she waved for the clone to continue. Sighing, it soon did. So he came to the conclusion that there must be an earth-shattering secret beneath the rock, but he doesn't know whether forcefully breaking through would trigger certain spells that would also destroy whatever was beneath it. So he sent a message to me asking whether any of you knew anything about the Rock of Cuthien, although judging from what happens whenever that damn rock is even mentioned, I doubt it. The clone shrugged in slight frustration until Aragon started. "Actually, remember when I mentioned about the Manoa tree that Salembum the Wercat had told me?" The clone quickly nodded as it remembered from the original's memories that he did mention that. "So, I'm guessing that this Salembum also told you about the Rock of Cuthien?" Seeing Aragon nod, the clone continued, "What else did he say?" Aragon rubbed his chin as he dredged up the memory. "Then, when all seems lost and your power is insufficient, go to the Rock of Cuthien and speak your name to open the Vault of Souls." The clone thoughtfully mirrored Aragon's earlier actions as it picked through the sentence with the years of experience from the original of looking through encrypted, and oftentimes annoyingly, unclear documents. Finally, the clone came to an answer. "Obviously, the part about the Rock of Cuthien refers to the giant rock we found in Doru Ariba. As for speaking your name to open the Vault of Souls, I doubt it's just your regular name, but mostly like it's your true name. So the rock won't open up unless you speak your true name. Whether it must be yours or anyone else's, I don't know." However, I expect it must be yours considering when I mentioned the rock earlier, there were actually 2 weak chakra strands that tried to go through the barrier, both of them directed at Arya and me, but none at you or Saphira. So someone must be controlling that spell to specifically target all others that knew of the rock, except for you. Aragon just stood there slack-jawed as he and Saphira slowly started to understand the immensity of the secret that laid underneath a 200-foot rock, buried beyond the depths of history. What do you think is in it? Aragon whispered as Saphira came closer, hoping against hope that they would get the answer they always wanted to hear. Well, it is called the Vault of Souls, and considering the new knowledge that Eldenari are basically manifestations of the dragons themselves, and when they die, their souls then attach themselves to their Eldenari. So, I would guess with certainty, that there must at least be a horde of Eldenari under that rock, if not anything else. The clone watched in satisfaction as the knowledge of there being free Eldenari to help overthrow Galbatorix showed itself in the form of Aragon, uncharacteristically yelling out in excitement and Saphira bugling out her joy to the world. Even Arya looked as excited as the two and began to think of ways to transport the Eldenari back to their rightful place in Alagaezia. As for the first part of the sentence, when all seems lost and your power is insufficient, I can see how you're frustrated at your lack of power, which I understand after you got your ass handed to you from Phelan and his red dragon. The clone smirked as its interruption made Aragon and Saphira growl at him, but what I don't understand is the very first part. How could anything seem completely lost when the boss is here? The clone proclaimed. The trio covered their eyes as they swore they could see beams of bright light shoot out of the clone's eyes as a burning sun came up behind him with waves lapping at his feet. When it ended, the three merely looked at each other before chalking it up to being one of Naruto's oddities. So now what? Aragon asked as Saphira wondered the same. Now we find your true name, and you're not gonna like what I'm about to do. The clone sadly smiled as the dragon rider pair started back up to flee. That's it for part 5. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.